everyone, and welcome to the David Goodman Reality and Truth Show. My name is Vanita Lambert, and I'm the host of this show. I want to thank you very much for tuning in with us today. And I have a very special guest. As you guys always know, all of my guests are very special. Miss Grace Clark. She is a retired nurse, and she's my NW sister, and she's also the founder of Covering My Sisters. So welcome to the show, Grace.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate all of our guests and all the information that you're going to share with us. I know today you're going to be sharing your story.
Yes.
About how Covering My Sisters came about, and we really do appreciate that. And I want to mention, before I forget and we get to the end of the show, this information is also on YouTube, and so everybody isn't going to get to see this. So if you're watching it and you know someone that might benefit from this information, please share the information, and please go on to Soundview Community TV and subscribe, and you'll get a notification with all of our wonderful shows, because we try to bring so much information out to the community. David Goodman was a city sheriff, and he left this platform for the community to take advantage of information. So that's what we try to do.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
So Grace, thank you again for being on the show. Would you mind just telling our audience a little bit about your background, and then we could get into your story?
Okay. My background is by trade. I'm a nurse. I'm retired. I do work every now and again. I teach psychiatric mental health nursing for nursing schools. But for the most part, I devote most of my time now to my organization and the other organizations that I'm a part of, like Vanita was saying, NCNW. So I'm very active with my grandchildren, and they take up a lot of my time. And so when I'm not with my grandchildren, I'm working on continuing to build this organization.
Awesome. I know grandchildren take a lot of time.
Yes. I love it.
I only have one, and she takes a lot of time, so I can imagine like more
Yep.
than one. It's awesome, though. So thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about Covering My Sisters, or tell us a little bit about your story, or whatever you like to share with the audience. Okay.
I will. Let me share my story first, because that's how Covering My Sisters was birthed. My story is kind of unique. As a survivor, you hear many different stories, and many stories are unique, but mine is unique in by way of an angel that really came to save my life. So when I was 38 years old, after having my children, I decided, I had a male doctor, and I decided I'm going to be 40. So let me find a female, 40 years old, body's changing. And so I just felt the urge to change doctors. And it took me a year because I kept putting it off and putting it off. And then my GP, I mentioned it to her, and she gave me the name of a doctor. So I made an appointment with an APRN who was she specialized in delivering babies and also women's breast health. Her name was Sarah Najami. And so when I met her the very first time, let me back up. So the old doctor that I had, he gave me an article that said, oh, you don't have to have a mammogram until you're 40.
That's what I heard, yeah.
And he gave me the article in hand. He had them in the office. And so when I went to Sarah and she mentioned mammogram, I said, well, I don't need to do that because the doctor said I don't need it until I'm 40. And she said, well, I just feel like I want you to have a mammogram.
Wow.
And so I said, sure. But I knew when I left I was not going to, because I didn't feel like I needed it. I was in perfect health. I was a whole lot lighter in weight than I am now. I worked out 3 or 4 times a day. 3 or 4 times a week. I ate. I was a vegetarian, and I felt in optimal health. So I didn't feel like I needed to have a mammogram.
And you still look great.
Well,
Okay.
thank you very much.
You look wonderful.
And so the interesting thing is that she called me at home like a couple of weeks later, and she said, I'm just calling to check and see if you had the mammogram. And I said, oh, this is strange. And I said, no, I didn't have it, but I'll have it done. I didn't get it done. So a couple of weeks later, she called me again.
Oh, wow.
And then she called me again. And so by the third time, I said, you know what, this lady's harassing me. I'm going to file a complaint with the office manager because she really was pressuring me. And so as I was thinking about that, I said, you know, let me just go and get this mammogram done. So I went to get the mammogram, you know, go through the whole flattening and all of that.
Oh,
you,
boy.
you know what I mean?
Oh, I feel like I
Flattening.
walk around with 2 pancakes after that for the day.
And so I had my first set of tests, and they said, and then I sat there, and I'm sitting there reading because I'm thinking, okay, this is the formality. So they came out, and the radiologist said, we need to take more pictures because we see microcalcifications, and they're like little dots in the breast. And I was like, oh, okay, no problem, no worries, do what you need. And so I went back, and I went back in again for another series of tests, and then I left. And that evening, Sarah called me. The very evening.
I'm getting goosebumps.
And she said, I'm so sorry, but they found a lump.
Oh.
It was a pencil dot size lump. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But she said they found a lump, and then she said, you got to find the surgeon, you got to go. The whole whirlwind started. So again, they found the lump. I'm thinking, okay, you know, can't be, I don't have cancer, can't.
You're 39.
I'm 39. I feel great. I had no palpated lumps. I couldn't feel it myself. She didn't feel it, so we didn't know. So after I went to the doctor, I had the surgery. They did they tested the tumor, and even though it was a pencil dot size, they told me I had the most aggressive type of cancer a woman could have.
Oh my God.
And had I waited until I was 40, I would have been in stage 4.
And that's how it happens.
That's how it happens. You know, I had no lump. I had no abnormal issues with my breast. My doctors didn't feel a lump at all. They found it on the mammogram. And that was my very first mammogram. So needless to say, then I went through, the whirlwind just continues for like a year. And I had so I had biopsy done. And back then, this was 24 years ago, yes. But
Amen.
back then, they did the biopsies. You had to undergo surgery. They weren't doing them in the office, so I had to have that surgery. Then they went back in. They wanted to check around to see how far it was around my margins. And I agreed to that because I really didn't know what that meant. And then they came back, and every time they cut a little bit, sampled the tissue, cut a little bit, sampled the tissue. And then they finally came back and told me that, you know, your margins are not clear, so you need to have a mastectomy. And on Valentine's Day in the year 2000, I had a mastectomy.
Oh, wow. Can I have a question? What does that mean when you say your margins are not clear? What does that mean?
So when they go in to check for the tumor, if the tumor is in one spot, they check around that spot to make sure there's no more cancer.
That it hasn't spread.
Right, it hasn't spread. So
they
took lymph nodes as well. Thank God I didn't have anything in my lymph nodes. And at that time, I was considered stage 1. But now it's considered stage 0, precancerous. So now, had I been diagnosed in the 2000s, I mean the later 2000s like we're in now, they probably wouldn't have done anything, maybe just a lumpectomy and maybe radiation. Probably not radiation because it didn't spread anywhere. But so I went through chemotherapy. That was tough. That was tough. And I remember my doctor telling me, if you were sick with your children, that determines how sick you'll
You're going to be
with
with chemo? Oh my
And
goodness.
I was sick. I was so sick with both my kids. And I said, oh my God. So, but you know, you endure it. And I remember one day, maybe in my third session of chemo, my mom came up from North Carolina to help take care of me because my children were 8 and 12.
Okay.
And I remember telling her, I'm not going. I'm not going today. I'm just not. I'm tired. And, you know, and she said, but you don't have an option.
You have to go. That's
You
right.
have to go.
You needed her to push you.
And I said, oh God, here we go. Because it's the cycle. You go in and you have the treatment. And then like 2 or 3 days after that, that's when all the nausea and the vomiting starts. And then you're weak. And then you have 2 good weeks. I mean, you have 2 bad weeks, and then 1 week you're good, and then you're going back in.
Oh my goodness.
So, but they teach you how to balance your time. So you know that when you're having your treatment, you find things you can do, like kind of bed bound. And then you know on your 3rd week, you have your energy. That's when you really focus on doing things outside and doing things with your family.
Right.
But I did that, and then so the next year, I went for a mammogram on my right side, and the mammogram showed changes. And I said, take it off. Take it off. And so then the following year, in 2001, I had another mastectomy on the right side. And they did test the breast tissue, and it was benign, which was not cancerous. Mm-hmm. But because they told me that you'd have to go every 3 months.
Right.
Every 3 months now, I'd have to go for treatment. I mean, for a mammogram. And that was just too stressful for me. I couldn't wrap my brain around every 3 months worrying about, okay, is cancer this time? You know, did it come back? So I just told them to take it off. And so I was on tamoxifen. It's for hormonal breast cancer. Mm-hmm. So I was taking the tamoxifen, but then after I had both my breasts taken off, I didn't need it anymore. So after my treatment and after my second mammogram, I didn't have any more treatment. So what I've had to do from there is to live with the long-term effects of the chemotherapy. And chemotherapy poisons. It's a poison that they give you to kill cancer, but it kills everything.
Everything else too. There are side effects.
Yes,
to
so
everything.
many side effects. You know, your nails and your feet turn black. Your nail beds and your toenails and your fingernails turn black. Of course, you lose your hair. But I was really, really sick. I was really sick. I couldn't eat. I didn't have the strength to pick up a spoon.
Oh, wow.
And I would really lie on the table and just kind of eat that way, and I'd eat the best I could.
I kind of understand what you mean, because I know my brother-in-law went through chemotherapy, and he just refused to do it again. And, you know, unfortunately, we lost him because he said, I just can't live like that. I just couldn't do that. So I just want to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
This angel, this is truly an angel.
Yeah.
And I am one who had a real life miracle happen to me. I truly believe in angels.
Yeah.
I truly do. And they're sent in all different forms. And, you know, so how did this come about that you had this cancer, this lump before 39? Is it in your family history? Is there anyone? See, that's the part it's truly an angel, because it's not like your mother had it or grandmother. It's not no family history of this.
Right.
And the average person does start having, you know, mammograms at 40.
Right.
So what do you recommend? You know, just, you know, everybody is not going to, you know, have an angel like you.
Yeah.
I mean, so many things happen. You switch from one doctor to another. And that was all not planned.
No,
you know what I mean? And this woman stalked you, basically.
She did.
I'm in sales.
Oh
I know what stalking is. She stalked you.
She did. And you know what? I was with her. She just retired. Uh-huh. And so I've been with her all of these years.
She's going to be your best friend.
Yes. I call her my guardian angel. And
Absolutely.
I said to her, I said, Sarah, you know, God really used you to intervene,
That's
you know,
right.
because I would not have done anything about it. And she said, you know, the typical nurse, you know, it's just that unction
No,
that
that's not
nurses
typical.
get.
That was
right,
more.
Right. So I said no. I said no. You are my guardian angel.
That's right.
And yeah, and so you're right. I did not have any family history.
Any family
And that
history?
was one of the reasons why I wasn't worried.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have any family history. But after, a couple of years after my diagnosis, I had like 3 cousins, first cousins. The one was a second cousin that were diagnosed, and an aunt that was diagnosed after me.
At an early age, like 30s,
Yes.
early
one
40s?
Of, one of my cousins,
Wow.
my second cousin, she was in her 20s. She had to maybe late 20s. And my other cousin, she's my age. But yeah, so they all of a sudden, so they were calling me, asking me, you know, about my experience and asking me what I recommend, you know. And actually, I just had a cousin last year, first cousin, who was diagnosed with breast cancer.
If I was related to you, I would go and get a mammogram.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's not a bad idea to get a mammogram if you feel like it at 35. You don't have to wait until 40. You can tell your doctor what
Right.
you want, and you know, as long as you have insurance,
Right.
it's going to be paid for. You know?
Especially
So,
if you have a family history.
Thank you.
If you have a family history, you can go to the doctor and express your concerns, and they're supposed to give you a mammogram. And if you don't have insurance, the hospitals have free mammograms now.
Awesome.
Because the goal is to save as many lives as possible. And we know that there are so many people who don't have insurance.
and that's valuable information. I didn't
Yes,
know that. If
yes.
you do not, and I'm an insurance agent.
Yeah, if you're underinsured or if you're uninsured, you can get a free mammogram.
So what do you do?
Yes.
Just go to like your neighborhood clinic? You go online? How do you do this?
You can contact the hospitals.
Okay.
Usually Bridgeport Hospital and Hartford Healthcare, they both have free mammograms.
Okay.
And I think they both, I know Yale does have the mammogram mobile that goes to, I think both of them do.
Yep.
But yeah, just reach out and ask someone.
Or
If
Google
you're-
it.
If you're not sure, for instance, I had an event a couple of weeks ago where I went to do education, and the DJ, who was a woman, asked me how could I get a free mammogram, you know, and so I gave her the information to go and contact them, you know, because so many people don't know that you're entitled to get
a free mammogram.
right. Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your events. I don't mean to keep throwing you off
Okay,
track, but
that's okay.
okay.
So my organization, one of the things that really saved my life when I was going through treatment and years after was support groups. I didn't know anything about support groups, but my family, my sisters who are hairdressers, one of their clients was an outreach worker for a breast cancer support group. And they mentioned me to her, and so she invited me. And there was nothing like being in a room with a bunch of women who shared the same scars, the same pain, the same stories. I felt so validated.
Yes.
I felt so validated because I felt relieved that finally I was in the company of people who understood.
Yeah, that's therapy.
Yes,
You need that.
And so that program closed down, and I knew one day that I would start my own organization. And so how the organization came about, this is another God moment. I was at a conference at Yale, and I was sitting in the conference. All of a sudden, I heard Covering My Sisters. I was like, Covering My Sisters? What is that? And God just spoke to me and said, Covering My Sisters. This is the name of your organization.
You mean you heard that like inside your head, like a little
Yeah,
bubble up
yeah,
here going,
yeah.
Covering My Sisters?
I just heard the
oh,
name.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I hadn't thought about the name. I wasn't even thinking about starting the group at that time. But the name, it just spoke to me. Like out of the blue, it was crazy.
That is another
And so-
miracle.
It's another miracle. And so then I went home and I just started writing it up. And so henceforth, Covering My Sisters was birthed probably 5 years ago now. And so the goal for our organization really is to provide education to the communities about breast health. You know, we try and attend as many events as we can to talk about breast health. And the other part is to support the survivors. And we provide support to the survivors by, walking them through the journey if they have questions. Because I can identify with you, get that first, you have cancer and you don't even, you're in another world. You don't even, like out of body experience. And so we try and walk people through the process of, okay, do you have any questions? We teach them questions to ask their doctors. So the goal is to empower the women to be able to not just take the doctor's word for everything, but to be knowledgeable, to be informed, so that they can make informed decisions with their doctor and their team. Not just, so many times, how many times are we, especially as our community, the doctors tell us something, we just go with it.
Exactly,
and we don't.
You cannot do that,
right?
Because
and sometimes they're, God love the doctors. Sometimes their motives are off, and like sometimes uninsured or underinsured people don't get the same information.
And black and brown people.
Black and brown people don't get so, and that's why we focus so much in our community, that we want to educate you about every aspect of this journey, so you can be informed to go in and talk to your doctors. And if they need us to go, we will go with them to appointments to help them navigate through the process, because it is, not everybody has a lot of support, and not everyone has strong family connections. So we try and be there for our survivors.
So you are the family. So I can just imagine, I know you said you give the information and so they can go to the doctor and ask their questions and everything, but I'm just thinking about the mental aspect of it. Hearing that you have cancer and just everything that runs through your mind, I could see myself going home having a complete meltdown.
Yeah.
So you have to also pick people up and say, listen, you are still here. Put one foot in front of the other one, go to work when you can, make a sandwich for your kid or whatever it is, while you're dealing with the back of your mind going every single minute of every day, the first week, let's say, I have cancer, I'm going to die. And that's, so how do you deal with that?
So the goal, that's one of the purposes of our group too, is that we are the faces of hope. Like, I'm still here. You see me here in the flesh. That means you have the chance to be here. Let's walk through the process. We know that you're afraid to die. I was afraid. I planned my whole funeral. I was going to wear all white. Everybody was going to wear white. Because my association with cancer, with death, I didn't know anything about survivorship. I didn't know anything about living with breast cancer. So I thought, even though they told me I was pencil dot size, and they could help me cure it.
It's treatable.
It's treatable, right? I just associated cancer with death.
It's a mental thing. You hear it all the time.
That's what you hear, right? And so and back when I was diagnosed, there weren't as many people surviving, but now there's so many people surviving. So we are the faces. We are the hope for people to see. And I'd love to, I don't love it because it's unfortunate, but you see a newly diagnosed person and you see the fear.
Yep.
And you say, I'm here.
I'm here for you. And this is a national organization, is that correct?
Yes. We just received our 501c3. So we are a national organization, yes. We received a grant. I wrote a breast cancer toolkit. And my baby, I call it my baby. And the breast cancer toolkit walks you through every aspect of the journey. The first 2 chapters are about breast health.
Okay.
What's in your breast, what's normal, what's abnormal, what things do you look for. So that's more for community family education. But the next chapters are for the survivor. What do you do now that you've been told? What's the next step? Well, the next step is now you have to either have an ultrasound or a PET scan or a biopsy. So we tell them every single test, we explain it and what it is and what it looks like. There's also a picture because you don't know what
you don't know what you
don't
know.
So we do that, and then we walk them through like grief, like because you go through the stages of grief. You're going to lose your breast, you're going to lose your hair, you're going to lose your functioning level, you're going to lose your energy. So how are you feeling during all of those times? What are you afraid of? You know, so we have a chapter in the book that talks about that.
Wow.
And then we talk about, okay, treatment. You have to have treatment. This is the treatment that you have to have. And we describe what that treatment is. This is who should be on your team. The list of doctors, from the doctor to the chaplain. We list everything in the book, and we explain what their functions are. And you have a right to ask for these people. For instance, I didn't know after I had my mastectomy that I could have physical therapy because you couldn't lift your arm. And it was through the support group that I found out I could ask my doctor for physical therapy.
Wow.
And so I did, but my doctor never mentioned it to me.
Yeah, they don't, You have to know the questions to ask.
Right.
It's just like when I sit down with people,
right.
You have to ask a certain amount of questions or the right questions so that you could get a
right.
recommendation or help
right.
for it. Grace, I want to thank you so much for coming on. This is such good information. Please come back and share with us. We have about 1 minute left.
Wow.
I told you it goes fast.
I didn't even scratch the surface.
I know.
Oh, wow.
So then we got to come back and finish up.
Yes.
So I see you have a list here. We covered what, the first part of it?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So we got to have you back, what, 3 more times?
Okay.
And just finish it all up. But in the meantime, people can reach out to Grace. You have your email address there, your telephone number there. Where else are you? Facebook,
we're
Twitter?
We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. I started a TikTok. We'll see what happens. I did my first TikTok reel, and so far I have like 900 and something views.
Wow.
So my daughter says, "Ma, you have to keep going."
Yeah, you do. You do.
I don't know how.
So So I'm sorry. We're gonna have you back. We are so out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the David Goodman Reality and Truth Show, and we're on your side.